Alright, so in case anyone was curious, I figured I'd just sort of go through and show you guys, how I broke this particular object down. The first thing I actually did, because I'm really lazy, you guys probably noticed, like, once I started adding edge loops to this, they would hit the top of this and then, like, bounce off some other crazy direction, so I'm literally just going to delete the top and the bottom. That way I don't need to deal with that, and I can just cap it off later. Personal preference, it really doesn't matter. So I'm just going to go in with my insert edge loop tool. I'll start up here because that's, pretty much, I guess, the easiest place to start. So we have the one loop here, and I'm just going to add another one on the top and the bottom. That'll harden that edge. Do the same thing up here. Harden this and that. That's really all you need to do for the top of this. So for this area in here, I'll worry about the triangle last, because that's pretty much always the weirdest shape to do. I put that in there specifically to be annoying. So I'll just sort of start working in here, and again, just start at the top, work my way down to the bottom, and then kind of start finishing off edge loops so they don't go insane. So for this loop here, I'll add a loop on the top, and sort of a loop on the other side here. That's going to harden this loop here, and then I'm just going to work my way down. So I've done this one, I'll start on this one, so I'll put a loop in here, and then another loop in here. That should pretty much take care of that. I'll go to the next one, loop there, loop in here. This takes care of this edge. I'm going to need another loop that's running through here. You can see there's only 2 loops defining sort of in this area. So I'll throw in a loop, and I'll throw in a loop in here. And this is the point where I usually can't keep track of anything, so I'm just going to my system has broken down, I'm just going to go in and actually add loops everywhere I need them. So again, just any edge should have 3 loops in it, so if we look at this loop here, there's an edge on the top, the bottom. If we look at this loop, edge on the top, edge on the bottom. It should go that way for pretty much this entire object. So I'm just going to go in. Here you can see we have one edge with an edge on one side, we need an edge on this side, pop that in. And same thing down here. So we have an edge, we need a loop here, and a loop here. And this one's done, but for this one, we don't quite have enough loops, so we have the original edge, another edge loop, and we need the third one, pop that in. And then we're also missing the third loop here, so we'll sort of throw this in. And then just sort of keep working your way down in some vague systematic way that hopefully works for you guys. So if we smooth this now, what you'll see, I think I've hit all the edge loops. Honestly, I usually forget one and then realize it later. So what you'll see is pretty much all of these edges are hardened. I'm just going to ignore the back. It's the exact same process as the front. Once you do it over here, just pretty much do the same thing in the back. So all the loops are hardened, but we have a little bit of like weird sort of ugly faceting. I will get to that. You know what, I'm just going to I'll finish the top section, and then I'll do the triangle, because it's the evil part, and then hopefully that'll sort of make sense. So what we want to do is go through and just sort of systematically decide where we don't want things to have this aggressive smoothing. So in this case, I don't really like how it has this sort of like straight, weird crease, and then pulls off down here. So what I'm going to do is just come in and grab these 3 vertices here and just do a merge to center, and do that here as well. And pretty much I could do one of 2 things. I could continue this all the way around, or I could just sort of pop in another loop here. So again, I'm just going to sort of largely ignore the back section of this. So I'll merge these to center, ignoring the fact that this looks terrible. I just need to be able to delete those loops. And then what you should be able to do is go through and click on this, double click on this, and then control delete them, and it's going to remove them entirely. And you'll see that now we have a reasonable looking smooth curve coming down the sides, so that weird sort of faceted look. And it's also gotten rid of the faceting on the front of this. I'm just going to really quickly assign this a blend. It becomes a little bit easier to see the ugly faceting as you rotate it around. So again, we don't have any of this horrendous faceting here. So for this bit, I will do exactly the same thing. I do not like this faceting here and this little edge here. So I'm just going to grab these edges or these vertices, pinch them together, and you'll notice that if we try to click on the edge loops now, again, it's running the entire way around. Like this one this loop and this loop we clearly need. So I just need to sort of end this somewhere in the back. I'm not being particularly neat about it, so I'll just kind of do that. Grab the loop, and again, since we've sort of smushed these together here, it's not going to select all the way around, so it'll leave these loops and not these guys. And just do a control delete again. So that pretty much takes care of this section here. Now we need to go through and figure out sort of what to do in this area down here. And this is where stuff usually tends to get like a little weird. You end up kind of wing a few things. Don't super worry about it, honestly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to actually just go ahead and merge these vertices the same way I did before. You'll notice when I do that, it does make some pretty disgusting looking pulling, and there's a few ways to handle that. It's a lot easier, like this sort of shape of loop is like usually much easier to deal with than these, what am I going for? Convex stuff tends to be easier to deal with than concave stuff. I might be using that totally wrong. Let's see. But if you find that pulling, the easiest thing you can do, hopefully, is actually just sort of scooch that away a little bit, and sometimes that will help reduce it enough where it's like not even noticeable. In this case, it didn't really seem to help, so what I'm going to do is just undo the stuff that I did before. And there's sort of two different ways I would usually approach this. One is, let's just add another edge loop in here, and I'll terminate these loops a little bit further down. So I will grab these, squish them in, and it's still a little bit weird. It's a little bit better than it was before, I guess. Kind of. And I usually just sort of play with things and see sort of what happens, honestly, in this situation. And this might be another instance where, like, down here, like, there's a little bit of weird pulling, but maybe if we bring this down a little bit, it'll sort of help to reduce that, which in this case doesn't super seem to be the case. Let's see here, what could I do? Alright, so sometimes it also helps, and like this is literally, like I am just kind of experimenting live, apparently, at this point. Sometimes it helps to get rid of tries and turn them into quads. In this case, that's probably not going to do a whole heck of a lot. Yes. Oh, wait, is that what I did last time? Okay. Maybe. I have no idea. Cool. Let me actually delete this loop really quick, and then... So sometimes you can actually do a thing, and this, like, you can also, you don't need to, like, manually remove all of these loops. So, like, in this case, what I'm going to try is, I'll just sort of do something with Topology here. You'll notice it did pretty much get rid of the weird pulling. And then I'm going to go through and just sort of grab this loop here, delete that. And this is going to leave a little bit of faceting. You can see there's still, like, a tiny bit. It's not as bad as this, but there's a little bit of, like, a weird curve in there. So you could do sort of two things at this point. One is just manually shift these edge loops away from each other. Honestly, I'm lazy. I'm not a huge fan of doing this. Depending on the shape of your object, it can be a little bit like annoying or tricky. We'll sort of deform the shape. So if we do that, that should also pretty much get rid of the pulling on the lower side. The other option that you could do, and this is honestly probably what I would do most of the time, assuming it doesn't look crazy, is just sort of merge that. We get a triangle here, and then we can delete one of these loops. And in this case, it is making a little bit of pulling, so the other option probably is a little bit better, to just manually separate things, but you can see it's significantly better than it was previously. So I'm going to have to pretty much recreate that up here. So to sum up what I just did is, we have 3 loops here, so we had 1, 2, 3, but I merged these, and now we don't quite have enough loops to merge all these 3 without getting like a giant mass of loops sort of coming into a big star. So I'm just going to grab these 2 and just deal with only the 2. So grab that face, merge to center, and just go ahead and delete that. Actually, you know what? Yeah, sure, what the heck. Delete that loop, go ahead, merge these guys, and then just delete one of those loops. So that's pretty much what I did down here, just, you know, up here and without all the extra experimentation. And that's relatively smooth. Again, it's a little bit neater if I were to manually separate the loops. It's going to give you a little bit nicer look. But in this case, this kind of does, you know, what I need for now. And that's actually going to turn into pretty much the exact same process for this area as well. If you look at this, it's pretty much the same shape you have up here. We're just dealing with the lower half instead of the upper raised area. So I'm going to go ahead and do exactly the same thing. This is incredibly repetitive of a process, but here we are. So again, I need to delete these loops, but I don't want to delete these sort of good ones that I wanted up there. So I'm just going to go in and just sort of sloppily do something or another in the back. Just tie those off, basically, so that I'm able to delete only the loops that I need. That's smooth, and again, up here is a little bit wonky, so I'm just going to go ahead and merge those. And I will do this all at the same time, so I don't even need to deal with the extra clicking. So I know I'm going to merge these guys together. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Click on this, click on, it really doesn't matter that much. Click on that, and go ahead and terminate those. So again, we have a try here. It would look a little bit nicer if I manually shifted the loops. It would also avoid that try, so your topology is going to be a tiny bit nicer. This is just sort of, you know, what I'm doing if I'm being a little bit lazy with things. So this one I'll try to cap off a little bit nicer just for grins. So I'll go through here actually in just no particular order. I'm not planning for the triangle. Every time I do this, it looks a little bit different, honestly. So I'll sort of go in here and kill that thing, grab this, and this one I'm going to try to do with the nice thing where I actually like manually spread the loops out a little bit. So I'll do something like that. And that pretty much takes care of this area down here. And again, manually moving those loops prevents a little bit of this sort of like pulling that you see here. Now, I do need to go in and sort of delete the heck... Oh, yes, I've added an extra loop, and it's like, I do not like this triangle. So sort of go in and mess with some of this stuff. So that is going to be pretty much the thing that I do now, and I'll ignore this until I finish the triangle area. So the same principle applies what we did before. You just, in this case, need to sort of be clever and draw in some extra topology. So what I'm going to do, I'll show you a really really quick and easy hacky way to do this. So grab all of the faces that are sticking out, extrude them, and I am just going to ever so slightly scale these inwards. This is not necessarily the most elegant way to do stuff, especially if you needed this to be the original size of things. But what you will notice is that by doing that, it does give you a really nice loop of edge loops that is running perfectly around this entire thing. If you were to do an insert edge loop tool, you could go in and really, really easily just add loops there, and you'll see that now we have a nice sort of hard button corner side thingy. So I'm just going to do that. The other, the heck with it, I'll show you guys the other thing. So again, if you don't want to, you know, extrude your shape, what you can do is go in with the Multicut tool. Hotkey, I'm using hotkeys, there's a button for it right there. And then you can basically manually draw in those loops, and then you're just going to have to sort of terminate a bunch of edge loops. It's not particularly fun, certainly not in any way glamorous, but it will give you the same results. Do be aware that the Multicut tool, while extremely powerful, will leave lots of n-gons all over your stuff. So you will need to cap off like this n-gon I'm about to make here, and pretty much all the other n-gons that are just sort of now exploding all over my mesh. So that's usually, I will multicut, clean up any horrendous n-gons that the Multicut tool has made. In this case, this is pretty much all quads, so I'm just going to kind of leave that there. Here we have an n-gon, so I'm just going to grab these guys and do a merge to center. There's another n-gon here, which, you know, should be cleaned up maybe by sort of slapping a weird try in there. Make a little bit of a pull. I'm going to kind of come back to that later. So I think where applicable, it's much easier to just sort of do that extrude thing I told you. It's going to basically keep all of your existing geometry and just sort of forcibly add in that extra little where you need it, and it's not going to like break too much of your stuff. So where applicable, that is usually the easiest solution in my opinion. So right now, again, my topology is pretty weird. I have like just a bunch of weird stuff, but it does sort of, it's starting to look like something resembling maybe what I want. So at this point, we have loops that are running almost all the way around the bottom. I'm just going to sort of merge these guys and merge that, and you do want to, as you go, sort of push those loops back up into place, otherwise you will get pretty extreme, weird-looking pulling. It's also looking like, at this point, I can sort of grab these guys and delete those. Gives me, you know, one less loop that I have to deal with in here. Alright, so I think... Oh, okay. So, looking at this down here, it actually looks pretty okay smooth. If you look at it unsmooth, you'll notice that this is like just inside of my shape, which isn't ideal, so I'll manually push that out a little bit. And again, extrude is a way easier way to accomplish this. I just wanted to show you what it would look like drawing it manually. And this one again is just sort of making some weird clipping. This is supposed to be like a 2-minute supplemental thing, but if you were curious, this is how I smooth things. Alright, so we have those loops drawn in. I will do Mesh Tools, Insert Edge Loop, and add just more loops to just, you know, go in, harden that edge again. So now we do have that really nice hardened edge at the bottom here. Kind of minimal pulling in there. So we'll come back to that a little bit later. And I think what I'm going to do is just go ahead and sort of start hardening that top loop. So we have this... I'm not going to lie, a lot of times, personally, I will just sort of leave this. As long as these corners were the shape I need, I would just kind of leave it with one loop up there. In this case, I will show you the quote-unquote proper way to do things. So what I'm going to do, I'll throw that loop in there for now, but I need all of these corners to be hardened. And I would like all of this, in the end, to be quads and tris, no n-gons. So what I'm going to do, we have this loop. I'll start at this edge here. So we have this, here's our corner. We have one loop that's defining this, and we basically need another loop on this other side. So in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and multi-cut this in. I'll make a weird little thing where I basically connect the... I basically just sort of continue this loop around. So we have a little teeny tri at the corner. This guy here is just a lovely little quad. And we have now a nice sharp corner. I'll come back to this a little bit, that could get cleaned up a bit. So I'm going to try, it seemed to work actually pretty decently, so I'm going to try something similar down here, where I just come down, multi-cut down into the corner, pop up to here, draw a little triangle across, draw a little triangle down, and then multi-cut over here. And if I smooth that, actually that looks better than whatever the heck I did the first time. It looks like, though, it seems like there's like a weird vertex just like floating there, so I'm just going to highlight that and delete it. No idea where that came from. And that actually seemed to work pretty darn nicely for the most part. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and do that down here, too. What the heck? Yeah, sure. For weird shapes like this, honestly, I just sort of wing it every time I do it. I don't know. You just kind of gotta, like, do it a bunch, and then the more you do it, you just sort of get more comfortable with messing with topology. But yes, so we have this. I've added, like, those extra tries, and I've done, like, weird pulling and stuff down here. I'll deal with that in a minute. And you can see that it's definitely more, it's triangular shaped. We just need to harden the top of this a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is kind of a variation on the bit where I was like, just grab the whole edge loops and extrude. I'm going to pretty much do that for the top of this. So I will grab just all of the faces on the top of this weird triangle shape, right? Extrude those, and I'm just using the Control-E for the hotkeys, and then just scale them inwards. Push them out a little bit so they're flat. And that should give you pretty nice looking top surface of this mesh here. Cool. Homemade crackers. And yes, so you could also go in conceivably and grab some of these guys, like maybe merge them. That I would be kind of less concerned about, honestly. So if you wanted to, like, you could do that down there. And that way you would actually be able to delete this extra little loop in there. And I do kind of like this as a shape to have this little sort of, I don't really know how to describe this, square with a line through it, I guess. It seems to do reasonable things. So again, I'll just sort of grab these guys, merge that to center, and that way you can grab this little vertex here and just delete that. And now you have the top of this, and it looks kind of decent, so cool. At this point, all that's really left in this is to go through and clean up some of the sort of funkier areas where there's pulling. Turn off my grid, this is very distracting. And clean up some of the areas like in here where there's like kind of aggressive pulling. And again, I have not found some magical formula to make this, you know, somehow beautifully work or anything like that. I pretty much do just wing it every single time I do this. And I'm actually going to see what happens. Like, what if I imagine this is actually going to be quite gross, but if I sort of grab that, just delete that extra loop, and smooth that. Okay, so this is something that I sort of saw on a lot of projects, like where there's probably like just a big star, but basically there's like a weird area where it sort of like pulls itself under the rest of your model. And that's obviously, you know, not super ideal if you look at it. It's oh, whoops. If you look at it, it's pretty visibly weird looking. I did a few too many undos. I'm just gonna. So we basically want to avoid that. If you see that happening in your model, usually that's just something you would want to go in and just sort of undo and redo it. So I'm going to see, just for grins, what happens if I draw this over here. And this is the part where I usually start winging it pretty gosh darn aggressively. So right now, if we look at this, we have an n-gon with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sides. That's definitely not ideal. So I'm going to try merging those to center, so we have like this weird, large quad sort of shape. So whatever I did there seems pretty decent, so I'm going to, again, just basically cheat a little bit and ignore the back, tie that off, and then delete that edge loop. And this is one of those things, I realize it's like a weird sort of demo tutorial thing. It's like a weird thing to explain. Like, I feel like I just sort of wing it every time I do it, so if this doesn't make sense, just keep practicing, and the more you do it, it will sort of it will start to make sense. But yeah, so I mean, this is like a little bit weird. It's weird if you look at the topology. If you're looking at the smoothed object, it's kind of decentish. It's like a weird little teeny bit of pulling. So in this case down here, like maybe I would try just sort of moving this down. So like a lot of times the tries will make a little bit of like weird. Tries sometimes will make sometimes like weird pulling. In this case, it does seem like moving it down helped a little bit. We have this little teeny pull here. So that would be something maybe I would want to go in and, like, what happens, just me being completely experimental, like what happens if I just draw these in, pretty much change the entire flow of this edge. I'll delete these entirely, and maybe draw these here. I don't know what I'm doing. I would explain what I was doing, but I don't know what I'm doing, so. Okay, I think yeah, great. I think that was kind of, actually, that actually looks pretty decent. Cool. Heck yeah. Okay, cool. So I basically just redrew what I had to try, instead of making little tries going like this, like really thin, skinny guys, I basically rerouted some loops so that I had very, very large tries here, and then some quads here. And that actually seems to do a much better job. So it seems like this actually might be kind of my go-to for dealing with weird triangle corners like this in the future. So basically, looking at this up here, again, instead of these really, really aggressive, long, skinny triangles, those ones in particular are really bad about making pulling and stuff. So what I'm going to do is, I think actually, yeah, so I'm just going to start at this little corner here, and instead of basically connecting that up to here, I'm going to connect it down so we have the much larger topology shapes. And then I'm just going to go through and delete these original edges. So just do Control Delete, and then if you smooth that, it looks pretty decent. I can still go through and, you know, play with one or two things in here, but eh. And that's certainly better than whatever the heck this monstrosity is. So I'm just gonna say this is pretty much how I smooth this object. The only, like, the last thing that remains to do pretty much every time I do something like this is to just grab these, do an extrude and merge to center. Don't forget to actually close your object back off. But again, this will save you, goodness, this will pretty much save you from having to do a bunch of crazy stuff with, you know, putting an edge loop in and then having it shoot out somewhere else, because that just makes everything 1,000 times harder to deal with. So again, just extrude, merge to center, and that'll cap that off. So for the rest of this video, might just be me sort of manually redrawing topology. No idea how long it'll take. It's going to be pretty experimental and weird. Stick around if you want. Otherwise, carry on with things. Alright, so I don't like these loops here, so I'm just going to add this and do this. Kill this. And that. And, okay, so apparently that took 3 edge loops. Great! That makes my life easier. Hooray! That's ugly. What is this? For some reason I have the, like, Augustus Gloop theme song stuck in my head, which is a little weird. It's pretty darn random. I want to watch Willy Wonka. Oh, cool. I did it! Alright. That was pretty much that. I don't really know the steps I took. I just sort of redrew things until we had topology that was sort of a little bit nicer. One thing maybe to be aware of that is actually a useful tidbit is when you have stars, so like this vertex with, you know, a bunch of edge loops coming out of it, they tend to not smooth as nicely. So in this case, by sort of making 2 stars close to each other helped a little bit with the pulling. Rather, it's like 2 stars with 5 edges. So we have like 1 edge, 2 edge, 3, 4, 5. That's usually 5 is like the maximum number of edge loops you want to have coming together at a single point. So what I've done here, instead of having like 7 edge loops, I've broken this up into 2 stars with 5 edges. And that kind of helped a little bit, I think, with the pulling in there. But yes, so here is the weird smoothie demo object thingy. That took way longer than it should have. But yeah, so hopefully that helped if you guys were interested in seeing how I personally did that.